Please subscribe and share for more story. The thin china teacup trembled in Marjorie Whitfield's hand, the faint clink against the saucer sounding unnaturally loud in the dining room. Moments earlier, her daughter-in-law, Sabrina Whitfield, had lightly tapped her spoon against a glass and smiled with polished confidence. "We have some news," she said brightly. "I'm pregnant again. Baby number 4. Cheers burst out around the table. Her son Caleb laughed in surprise, relatives clapped, and someone joked about buying another crib. But Marjorie did not move. At 70, her breath stalled in her chest as she stared at the children seated nearby, the same children she had dressed, fed, and comforted for nearly 8 years. A wave of exhaustion rolled through her, sharp and suffocating. This announcement did not feel like joy. It felt like a sentence. Another child meant more years of quiet labor, more money she no longer had, more pain her body could not carry. As glasses clinked and smiles widened, Marjorie understood with chilling clarity that this celebration marked the moment she would finally stop disappearing. For nearly 9 years, Marjorie had been the quiet force holding her son's household together. While Sabrina floated from one idea to another, short-lived online shops, brunch meetings, photo shoots, Marjorie handled the reality. School drop-offs, sick days, groceries, bills. She told herself it was temporary, that Sabrina just needed time to mature. "She'll settle in once the kids are older," Marjorie often whispered to herself. But the years slipped by, and the responsibility never shifted back. Her pension shrank month by month, quietly redirected toward a life that wasn't hers. When Sabrina looked at her that night, eyes bright with expectation, Marjorie felt no joy rise to meet it. Only a hollow ache. She realized then that love had been confused with obligation, and obligation had slowly erased her. It had begun almost innocently. When the first child, Owen, was born, Marjorie was 61 and eager to help. Sabrina had been 23, tearful and overwhelmed, clinging to Marjorie's arm in the hospital room. "I don't know how I'll manage," she'd whispered. Caleb worked long hours then, desperate to establish himself. "Mom, could you stay for a bit?" he'd asked. Marjorie agreed, without hesitation. A few afternoons became full days. Full days became every weekday. "I just need to rest," Sabrina would say. "I have an appointment. I'm so stressed today." Within a year, Marjorie had keys to the house and a standing routine. No one ever asked if she was still willing. They just assumed she would show up. One gray autumn morning made everything painfully clear. Marjorie stood in the kitchen tugging boots onto a squirming toddler while holding a baby against her sore shoulder. Her knees throbbed, and her lower back burned with familiar pain. Sabrina swept in late, dressed impeccably, phone already in hand. "Don't let Miles sleep past 1, she said without looking up. "I've got a lunch meeting." Marjorie tried to speak. "My joints are acting up today." "Maybe you could." Sabrina turned, her face instantly soft. "You know how important these connections are for Caleb," she said gently. "And the kids are safest with you." The message was clear. Say no, and you don't love them. Marjorie swallowed her protest and nodded, as she always did. By the time the third child arrived, Marjorie's role was no longer questioned. She was the constant, the default solution. She arrived before sunrise and often left after dinner, too tired to cook for herself. Over the years, she quietly covered expenses, school supplies, groceries, medical copays, even part of the down payment on their family car. When she hinted at slowing down, Sabrina would sigh dramatically. "I don't know what we'd do without you," she'd say, never offering to change anything. Marjorie believed endurance was love. She believed sacrifice was duty. And so she kept going, even as her body protested and her savings dwindled. The pregnancy announcement shattered the illusion. When Sabrina asked, "Aren't you happy?" Marjorie felt something shift inside her chest. She stood, hands steady despite the adrenaline rushing through her. "No," she said simply. The room froze. Sabrina laughed, trying to smooth it over. "You're just overwhelmed." Marjorie shook her head. "I won't do this again. I'm done raising children that aren't mine." Caleb stared at her in disbelief. "Mom, they need you. They need parents," she replied quietly. "And I need my life back." She gathered her coat and left without another word, heart pounding but strangely light. The backlash came swiftly. Sabrina flooded social media with tearful posts about abandonment and betrayal. Calls poured in from relatives. "She's pregnant," they scolded. "You can't be selfish now." Then, one evening, police lights filled Marjorie's living room. A welfare check. Allegations of neglect. Sabrina had called authorities, claiming Marjorie had abandoned children she was responsible for. Marjorie explained calmly, showed proof, and the officers left apologetic. But the humiliation lingered. Neighbors watched. Whispers spread. Fear crept in. But beneath it, resolve hardened. Days later, a formal letter arrived threatening legal action for emotional damages and breach of agreement. Shaken, Marjorie sought help from Arthur Klein, an attorney who had known her late husband. He read the letter and scoffed. "This is intimidation," he said. "But we need evidence." At the bank, Marjorie printed nearly a decade of statements. The numbers stunned her. Over $58,000 spent. And buried in old shared files, something worse. Proof of Sabrina's hidden income. Tens of thousands saved while Marjorie paid the bills. Arthur looked at her gravely. "This isn't generosity anymore," he said. "This is exploitation. And now, we protect you." The following morning, Marjorie sat across from Arthur Klein in his downtown office, clutching a folder of bank statements. Arthur scanned the pages, his expression hardening. "You weren't helping occasionally," he said. "You were subsidizing an entire household." Together, they traced nearly 9 years of expenses: groceries, school fees, medical copays, utility bills. The total climbed past $58,000. Marjorie stared at the number, stunned by how quietly her future had been drained. "I thought I was being useful," she murmured. Arthur shook his head. "You were being used." As they searched through old emails for receipts, Marjorie remembered a shared photo folder Sabrina had created years ago. "She might still have documents in there," Marjorie said hesitantly. Arthur nodded. "Check everything. People who lie once usually leave footprints." Back home, Marjorie opened the forgotten folder on her laptop. Among baby photos were neatly labeled subfolders: invoices, brand deals, tax records. Her hands trembled as she clicked. What she found made her breath catch. Contracts, sponsorship payments, screenshots of deposits. Sabrina wasn't struggling at all. She was earning steadily and saving quietly. One statement showed a balance just under $90,000. Marjorie leaned back in her chair, heart pounding. All those times Sabrina had cried about money. All the "we can't afford it" conversations. It had all been a lie. Marjorie whispered aloud, "You let me pay knowing this." The guilt she'd carried for weeks evaporated, replaced by cold clarity. This wasn't misunderstanding. It was deception. Arthur was silent for a long moment after reviewing the documents. Then he said, "This changes everything." He explained the terms slowly: financial exploitation, misrepresentation, elder abuse. "She crossed legal lines," he said firmly. Marjorie felt a strange mix of fear and relief. "I never wanted a fight," she admitted. Arthur met her gaze. "You didn't start one." "She did, when she used the police to scare you." They prepared a strategy, both defensive and firm. Marjorie would not retaliate publicly. She would let facts speak. But Arthur warned her, expect escalation. When control slips, people like this push harder. Marjorie nodded. She was tired of being afraid. The escalation came through the children. On a quiet Friday, Marjorie drove to Owen's school with a book she'd bought him. At the front desk, the administrator hesitated. "Mrs. Whitfield," she said gently, "you're no longer authorized for pickup." Marjorie felt the floor tilt. There must be a mistake. The woman shook her head. "We were informed there are concerns about your mental state." The words stung like ice. Marjorie walked back to her car slowly, gripping the steering wheel as tears fell. She cried for the confusion the children must feel, for the lies being planted in their minds. But as the tears dried, resolve returned. If Sabrina wanted war, Marjorie would end it properly. The final confrontation came at Owen's 8th birthday party. To maintain appearances, Sabrina had insisted on inviting Marjorie, on one condition. Just apologize, Caleb had pleaded on the phone. Please, Mom. Marjorie agreed to attend, but not to apologize. The party was held at a relative's large home, decorated perfectly. Sabrina moved through the crowd, glowing with sympathy and attention. When Marjorie arrived carrying a large gift bag, Sabrina smiled smugly. I'm glad you came to your senses, she said loudly. Marjorie said nothing. She walked to the center of the patio and set the bag down. Instead of a toy, Marjorie pulled out a thick binder. Conversation slowed. Faces turned. I'm not here to apologize, Marjorie said evenly. I'm here to tell the truth. Caleb stepped forward nervously. Mom, please. Marjorie met his eyes. You deserve to know. She opened the binder and passed copies around. Over 9 years, I spent $58,000 supporting this household because I was told you were struggling. Murmurs spread. Sabrina scoffed. How petty. Marjorie turned another page. Here is proof that Sabrina had a separate savings account containing nearly $90,000 during that same time. Silence crashed down. Caleb stared at the document, then at his wife. You said we couldn't afford repairs, he whispered. Sabrina's composure cracked. That money was mine, she snapped. You had no right. Marjorie's voice was calm. You had no right to drain my retirement while hiding yours. The family shifted, whispers growing louder. Desperate, Sabrina clutched her stomach and cried out dramatically. Panic rippled through the crowd. Marjorie didn't move. She's not in labor, she said calmly. A retired physician in the family confirmed it moments later. The performance collapsed. Sabrina's mask slipped completely. The party ended in stunned silence. Days later, Caleb moved out. Divorce proceedings followed quickly, supported by documentation Arthur submitted. Custody arrangements changed. Sabrina's online image collapsed under quiet scrutiny and local gossip. Marjorie recovered her money through settlement and finally exhaled. A year later, she lived differently, painting classes, travel, quiet mornings. She saw her grandchildren often, warmly, but on her terms. When Owen once asked why she stopped coming every day, Marjorie smiled gently. Because love doesn't mean disappearing, she said. It means standing up so everyone can grow. The weeks that followed were quiet but heavy. Caleb moved into a small apartment near his office, taking only what he needed. He called Marjorie late one evening, his voice low. I didn't see it, he admitted. I wanted things to look fine. Marjorie listened without interrupting. I know, she said gently. But ignoring the truth doesn't make it disappear. For the first time in years, their conversation felt honest. There were no excuses, no guilt wrapped in affection. Just two adults facing reality. It hurt, but it was clean pain, not the slow poison she had lived with before. The legal process was draining but necessary. Arthur handled most of it, shielding Marjorie from unnecessary stress. Sabrina fought at first, emails, accusations, emotional messages, but the evidence was overwhelming. Eventually, a settlement was reached. Marjorie received back the money she had lost, along with a formal retraction of the false claims made against her. When Arthur called with the final confirmation, Marjorie sat down at her kitchen table and closed her eyes. It's over, he said. She didn't cry. She simply breathed. For the first time in years, her chest felt light. Sabrina's carefully curated life unraveled quietly. Invitations stopped. Sponsorships disappeared. People who once praised her devotion grew distant. She moved back in with her parents, the fourth child arriving without fanfare or filtered photos. Marjorie felt no joy in this downfall, only distance. I don't hate her, she told Caleb once. I just won't sacrifice myself for her anymore. Caleb nodded. He was learning how much had been hidden behind convenience and charm. Parenthood, without a safety net, forced him to grow in ways avoidance never had. Marjorie's own life slowly expanded. She enrolled in a beginner painting class and laughed when she ruined her first canvas. She bought a small used camper and took weekend trips south, chasing warmer weather and quiet mornings. She cooked for herself again. She rested without guilt. Friends noticed the change. "You look lighter," one said. Marjorie smiled. "I am." She was no longer measuring her worth by how much she endured. She was learning joy could exist without exhaustion. Her relationship with the grandchildren returned gently, rebuilt on honesty rather than obligation. Weekends were for baking cookies, reading stories, short walks. And then, most importantly, she went home. When Owen once asked, "Why don't you stay longer?" Marjorie knelt beside him. "Because everyone needs their own space to grow," she said softly. "And that includes me." He considered this, then nodded. Children understood more than adults gave them credit for. One afternoon, Owen asked the question Marjorie knew would come. "Why did you stop coming before?" She took her time answering. "Because sometimes people forget to be kind," she said carefully. "And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is say no." Owen frowned. "Does saying no mean you don't love someone?" Marjorie smiled sadly. "No. It means you love yourself too." He accepted that, satisfied, and ran off to play. Sabrina did not reach out again. Marjorie didn't expect her to. Some bridges, once burned, are meant to stay that way. What mattered was the future, clearer, quieter, honest. Caleb showed up differently now. He cooked. He attended school meetings. He listened. One evening he said, "I'm sorry I didn't protect you." Marjorie squeezed his hand. "You're learning," she replied. "That's what matters." On rainy mornings, Marjorie sometimes thought back to that dining table, the trembling teacup, the applause, the moment she almost stayed silent. She knew how close she had come to losing herself completely. Saying no had cost her comfort, approval, and illusion. But it had given her something far greater, herself. Strength did not arrive loudly. It arrived quietly, one boundary at a time. Marjorie often shared her story with friends her age. Women raised to believe endurance was virtue. "Love shouldn't hurt like that," she would say. "And sacrifice without gratitude is not noble, it's dangerous." Some listened. Some weren't ready. Marjorie understood. Awakening came in its own time. But she hoped her example planted a seed. Marjorie Whitfield no longer defined herself by what she gave away. She was a grandmother, yes, but also a woman with a life, a future, and a voice. Dignity, she learned, does not fade with age. It strengthens when finally claimed. And the day she chose herself was not the end of her family, it was the beginning of a healthier one. Thanks for watching. If you value stories of respect, dignity, and justice, please subscribe. It means more than you know, and it lets me keep sharing the lessons life has carved into me.